What's up guys, I'm Alan with Edge Autosport, and today's episode of On the Rollers is brought to you by this beautiful 2018 Focus ST with a big turbo, with ox fuel, and ethanol in the cabinet ready to go. What's up guys, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Again, for you, I've got another Focus ST, big turbo, ox fuel, all the fun stuff that everyone likes to see. This car is pretty much brand new. It's a 2018 Focus ST, has 10,000 miles on it, and it is coming to us from out of state. The new owner, Austin, he purchased this car and had it shipped out here. Different altitude, definitely needs a retune. Austin got a great deal on this car. It came fully loaded in terms of aftermarket mods. It's got all the bolt-ons, full turbo back, intercooler, intake. It has a GTX 2867 and 4-port ox fuel. So we're gonna be running it today, 91 octane and E50. We just gotta check some boxes first to make sure we're not going to have any issues on the dyno. So first up for this car is gonna be a compression test. And we're also gonna inspect the plugs and replace if necessary. But since it has 10,000 miles on it and it hasn't been running on this setup for that long, I can't imagine we'll need to, but if we do, we have them here. So let's go and get to that compression test. And I'll show you guys how to do that because I know there's guys out there, I get asked all the time when I recommend compression tests, like how do you do it? So we're gonna show you today how to do a compression test on the Focus ST. All right, so first things first, guys, we're gonna get these coil packs out of the way. And it looks like, oh, that's, okay, never mind. I know what that's for. That's for this unplugged thing, which is why it's good to look for stuff when you have a new car. This stuff has been capped off because the blow-off valve controller on the top of the valve cover has been deleted on this car, which is good. I prefer that anyways. Get the coil packs unplugged, and we're gonna get them off. We're probably gonna have to maneuver this guy out of the way, this intake tube, which is always fun. We'll just keep these guys in order here. And now we'll pull out spark plugs. Hopefully it's had enough time to cool down so I'm not going to severely burn myself. And that's one thing I like to feel when it's not too hard to pull your spark plugs out. If it takes a ton of force to break the spark plug loose, the spark plug was put in way too tight. So these were installed correctly. A little bit of oil on there. It's a little on the white side, but not too bad. Gap is a little bit tight, but for this car, 0.024 is good. This is a 0.025. Let's see, I have a 0.024 here. We're gonna be running E50 on this. Yeah, it's at 0.024. Typically, yeah, for this setup, that's where I'd want them to be. So that's really good that the plugs are holding their gap. They look pretty good. I'm going to probably just leave them in and not worry about replacing them unless we happen to run into some issues later. But I think these are probably gonna be just fine. All right, so we got the plugs out, and according to my source, Payne Performance Engineering, hashtag tuned by Payne, Mr. Supra himself, you can't read plugs just by pulling them out of the car and looking at them. The only way to really get a good feel for what they're doing is to do a full pull, shut it off the top of the pull, and pull the plugs out as soon as you come to a stop. Otherwise, things happen between doing the pull that changes what the plug looks like. So, but you can get a general idea. Like these are a little bit on the sooty side, so it does look like it's running on a little bit rich, and there is some oil on the tops of the threads, which my guess for that is the valve cover gasket's probably leaking a little bit down into the spark plug valley. There's on the Focus STs, you've got like an outer gasket and an inner gasket, and that's probably what's leaking on these. But otherwise, these look really good, and I'm gonna reuse them. I'm not gonna replace them. So next up, we have the compression tester. And every compression tester is gonna read a little differently, so I'm not super concerned about the peak numbers on this car. I'm more concerned that they all look the same. So we just want them to be even across all 4 cylinders. So we're gonna start with cylinder number 1. And ideally, when you're doing one of these, you wanna have someone looking at the gauge, because on the first to second crank, like where the needle goes to for that first crank over, is gonna tell you usually more than what just the full compression test will tell you. Usually I don't have anyone looking when I do this, so what I look for is where it ends up after about 10 cranks. So with the Focus ST, you push the button, you let it crank over 10 times, you push the button to stop it. That's the way I do it. And the other thing you got to do is put your foot on the clutch and floor the gas at the same time when you start, and that'll shut off the injector so you're not injecting fuel while you're doing the compression test. The other thing to note, is you want all the spark plugs out, because you don't want any resistance from the other cylinders with the spark plugs in, because they're going to build compression. So you don't want the cylinders to be able to build compression. So all the spark plugs are out, all the coil packs are out. I'm going to floor the gas, floor the clutch, crank over 10 times, and that's how I do the compression test on these cars. All right, so we're at about 129 to 130, which at our altitude is okay, and for my own benefit, I'm gonna take a picture so that I remember. 129 for cylinder number 1. Okay, so that one is considerably higher. It is at looks like 39. It's a little bit concerning. We'll see what these other ones look like. And we might just have to take a look and see what number 1 looks like again, just double check it, but we're gonna do the rest of them first. My guess is based on the plugs. I'm gonna throw out a guess, I'm probably wrong, but 1 and 4 are probably gonna be close to the same, and 2 and 3 are gonna be close to the same. All right, so that one, it's like 135. So just a teensy bit lower than number 2. See what number 4 looks like, and then we'll go back and double check number 1. Yep, I was fairly close on that. Interesting. We are at about 125, 124 on that one. Let's double check cylinder number 1. We'll go from there. I mean, we're not at a point where the compression is too far off that we can't tune the car, but that is a little bit concerning that we got such lower compression on 1 and 4. Well, it's a little better there at 130, just a little bit over 130. So that's putting mixed cylinder 4 just a little bit on the low side. Let's double check that one again. I'm not super worried. I just kind of want to see where it is. The engine is warm also. Sometimes if you do a cold compression test, sometimes you'll get some weird numbers. You come back and do a warm compression test and things will be normal, but this engine is warm. Let's try 4 one more time. Oh, 125, so yeah. So we got 129 to 130, cylinder 1, about 139, 140 on cylinder 2, 135-ish on cylinder 3, and 125 on cylinder 4. So there's a little bit of difference between them, but not enough, I think, to be concerned at the moment. So we are going to move forward with tuning the car. Looking at the ground strap on these, and of course it could be with how it's tuned right now, maybe it won't necessarily be a problem, need to be read again later, but it does seem like it's in need of a slightly colder plug, or 1-step colder plug. So that might be something that we do in the future, is throw in some ITV 24s or some Brisk, whatever the Brisk 2-step colder plug is for this car. But yeah, the 1-steps are right at the edge of where they need to be. So like I said earlier with spark plugs, you don't need them to be super tight. Get this one in here a little bit more. You don't need them to be super tight. I'll usually just grab right around the head of the wrench and twist like that. You don't need to grab out here and really torque it. It just needs a little bit of torque right there. So that's my tip for installing plugs. That way you don't have to break them off in your head when you're getting ready to change them. Okay, so we just got everything set up, and we're gonna do a test hit on the current tune and see what it does after digging through the map notes on the current tune, which thankfully there's good map notes on it. I'm assuming that it's non-aux fuel based on the amount of boost they're running and the fact that the aux fuel was unplugged when it got here on 91 octane. So I'm just gonna keep an eye on my AFRs and my boost pressure and make sure that it's not going lean. But I think that they have it set up to not run aux fuel on 91 octane. And from what I can tell, it is running aux fuel on E50. But right now we're on 91, and we're gonna do a test pull on the current 91 map. And then I will tune for 91 octane, and then we'll start doing the E50, and I'll test their E50 map as well, just so we can have a little comparison and see what it is. It really needs to be retuned for the high altitude anyways, but it's just not a bad idea to do that, but we'll see how their tune performs regardless. So right now I'm just bringing the boost up without aux fuel. One thing that we're running into with this car is it's not wanting to boost. So we've got, I think on the last pull is at about 50% duty cycle, and we're barely hitting 20 pounds of boost. So I've increased it quite a bit, and based on the log from the previous map, from the previous tune that was on the car, they were running like 70% duty cycle, and it was only hitting 22 PSI. So that means we're probably not going to be able to get the kind of boost out of this turbo that we want to make the power that the setup is capable of, which is likely an issue with the wastegate. This is internally gated GTX 2867. Most likely the wastegate needs a little bit more preload on it or something along those lines. The customer has been asking about external wastegate. It may be one of those deals where we send him out to get external wastegate, come back and get a new tune, and then we can run more boosts. But for now, we're kind of limited by the setup, which is the internal gated turbo. And I have seen quite a bit more boost on these internally wastegated turbos, so I really don't know if on install maybe they didn't preload it enough, or if it just happened to come from ATP and didn't get checked. But either way, we're kind of maxing out the setup, so that's going to be the limit here, and I guess we'll see what happens. Boost did come up quite a bit on that one. I did bump wastegate quite a bit, and it held a much smoother boost curve than what was on the previous tune, so I'm pretty happy with that actually. And we hit 23 and a half, we're right at 24 pounds of boost, and it's tapering off to 22 pounds of boost, which I'm concerned there because we're at 69% duty cycle up top, so it's probably not going to be able to hold too much more boost on the top end, which is still going to limit us. But spark advance is still really low, and we made 330 horsepower on that pull, up from the baseline was at 318 on the previous tune. So that makes me think I've got some room to grow here. I'm going to go ahead before I turn the aux fuel on, and we're going to give it a little bit more spark advance on the current boost map and see if it likes it, just to kind of see where it ends up without aux fuel. The power band looks a lot smoother. I'll share the, I'm going to do this one more revision, and then we'll throw the comparison up, and that way you guys can see the difference it makes. A little bit better power band. But anyways, let's go ahead and flash this map and do another pull. Okay, so I just finished up what I'm calling the no aux 91 octane tune. I am going to turn the aux fuel on. I'm probably not going to turn the boost up anymore because I want to leave it fairly conservative on 91 octane. But from what I was able to do, we were able to get a substantial amount more power and just better power band over the previous tune. The previous tune is a competitor of ours. I'm not going to drop names though. I don't want to call anybody out. Also, it's not really that it was a bad tune or anything. There's just areas that we're able to improve on, and then also just tuning it for the higher altitude, because this car was tuned at sea level or closer to sea level, and it makes a difference. There's definitely some areas that are improved on. Here's the graph. I'll show you guys the comparison. Right here in the 3,000 to 3,500 RPM range, we got 50-ish foot-pounds of torque gain right there. That's a huge gain in the spool up zone. For peak torque, we're making just a little bit more. It's like 340 or 336 is what the peak torque on the previous tune made, and then we're at a peak torque of 347. And then the power band in the mid-range from like 4,500 up, we see gains. 4,500 RPMs, we're at about 26 foot-pounds of torque right there, and it pretty much stays at about 20 foot-pound of torque, 20 horsepower gain from 4,500 RPM up. And really, we're not running all that much more boost. There's some other things that go into it, like cam timing and spark advance, but yeah, so we were able to just kind of improve over the whole thing without aux fuel. But this guy doesn't want to unplug his aux fuel. He wants to have aux fuel on all the time, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that on, and once that's on, it's no longer a fair comparison, and so I'm gonna just go ahead and use this as the comparison, as the before and after for the previous tune to now, and then everything after this will be new until we get to E50. But once we put the E50 in, we do have an E50 aux fuel map to try out, and we'll see what that looks like, and we'll see what kind of comparison we can get from that. It says in the map notes on that one that it will do 28 pounds of boost. I don't think it's going to do that at this altitude. I don't think it's going to do that based on what I'm seeing in wastegate duty cycle numbers here. And if it does, it's probably because we'd have to push the wastegate to 100% to get there. But we'll see. It surprised me. I was actually not quite expecting it to come up as much as it did. We're sitting here at about 23 pounds of boost, which is really good for 91 octane. Anyways, let me get this aux fuel plugged in, and let's modify the map so we can run it and go from there. All right, here comes the E50 blend.
They see me rolling, they hating.
Finished up, didn't quite get the numbers we wanted to get to. Ended at 390 wheel horsepower, 375 foot-pounds of torque. It's all turbo limit. It's not, the internal wastegate is maxed out. We're not getting any more boost. That's only 24.5 pounds of boost, so definitely got more room in it if we get some more boost out of it. I'll throw it up on the screen for you guys. The current map that I'm looking at is this. I compared the E50 from the previous tuner to my E50 tune. Both are running about the same boost. As far as like peak differences, there's really not all that much. We're at about 366 torque on the previous tune, and we're at 375 on my tune. So about 10 foot-pounds of torque, not all that much. Horsepower, we gained, we went up to 390 from 375, so about 15 horsepower on the top end. So not a huge amount. The real gain is going to be in the spool up area, where we've got about 30 to 40 foot-pounds of torque gain in the 3,000 to 4,000 RPM range, right around 3,500 especially. So that is where there's a pretty large gain there. But anyways, part of that is just the standard fare for the tune, and part of that is altitude differences of where it was tuned at originally. The biggest thing is like it's a bit cleaner and it's not going to be as rich. On the previous tune, I noticed that the fuel trims are like minus 25 at wide open throttle, which is somewhat typical for aux fuel cars if you're not compensating for the aux fuel. And with mine, I'm compensating for the aux fuel, so I'm seeing my fuel trims are right about plus or minus 5 even at wide open throttle with the aux fuel on, which is ideal, or more ideal. It's really difficult to do that with aux fuel on these cars because of the way they because of the speed density setup. You got to go in and change all the speed density tables, your load tables come down, and then also I'm running aux fuel for both 91 and E50 on the same map, so that does make it so that you can't get it perfect for both fuels. So you're going to be a little bit rich on one or a little bit lean on the other. I try to be right about 0 on E50 and be a little bit rich on 91, but that adds a convenience factor of not having to change maps when you change fuels. The other thing about that is like that's what kind of stops you from being able to run like full E85, because E85 requires so much more fuel than E50 that you can't really run an E85 map on the aux fuel controller and a 91 map. You'd have to switch them, so that's more inconvenient than actually blending at the pump. And that's really why I like to tune to E50 on these cars, because you're not really going to gain anything more going to full E85, at least not a whole lot. You really stop seeing gains past E60. So at E50 you can have the best of both worlds. You don't have to change maps, you just change map slots for your fuels and you just got to blend. So it's kind of a trade-off. Which do you prefer? But anyways, that's all for this video and this car. My recommendation for the customer is a external wastegate. That's going to give us a little bit more control of the boost, allow us to make more power throughout the whole power band, and get past that 400 horsepower mark. And yeah, I mean, that's the next step in mods for this car. That is the only thing this car really needs. And so I hope to have it back here before too long, making some more power. If you want to see more content from us, be sure and follow us on Instagram. It's Edge Autosport, or you can follow me personally at Alan_@_Edge, and the @ is spelled out AT, not the @ sign. So yeah, anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. We'll catch you next time.